what you're saying is loan applications are actually increasing.
Oh, everybody's coming out of their basements. They're coming out of the woodwork. They're jumping in on this
While
thing.
the rest of the market is saying, where are the buyers? We had about 50 come through. Hello, Internet. This is Peter Bradrick. I'm the owner and founder of the Red Banner team. Welcome to the Red Banner podcast. I'm here with my CFO, Brandon Fonts, also one of my best friends in the world, and also a published author, published financial analyst, and one of the most sophisticated Wall Street traders that I personally know. Brandon, welcome back to the Red Banner team podcast.
Yeah, good to be here. Good to be back.
Dude, so last time we were on here, we talked a lot about what's happening in the market. Let's talk about what we're seeing today, right now, what's happening, what opportunities there are for buyers and sellers. Anything you want to share before I jump in with some stories and stuff? What's on your mind today? End of July, beginning of August, 2025.
Yeah, rolling over July and into August, and where does the year go? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Biggest thing I think that we're kind of watching right now is kind of like a trifecta, which is a really common trifecta, and is going to be the interest rates. Like everybody cares about interest rates on both sides. The second is going to be listing inventory. You know, what's listing inventory, uptick, downtick? What does that look like? And then what is mortgage loan applications look like? Are they up or down, right? So your application side would be your buyer's influence, right? And then your listing inventory would be your seller's influence. And then interest rates are kind of stuck in the middle, dictating, you know, where prices are going to go and what people's monthlies are going to look like. So how would that translate into what we're seeing? Well, the reality of what we're seeing on the numbers side from the statistical portion is that loan applications are actually increasing same month year over year in July. So
which is crazy because what we're seeing boots on the ground in the market is it feels like there's way fewer buyers, but what you're saying is loan applications are actually increasing.
Yeah, so loan applications are actually increasing, and it sounds like you may have potentially found a solution to this little scenario that they have going on between the push and pull between buyers and sellers. But if you have loan applications increasing by 5% July 2024 to 2025, we have more buyers entering the market, right? That's pretty obvious. So the other side is that you also have listing inventory increasing at the exact same amount. So everybody's kind of entering at the exact same pace. And basically what you see is you just see the exact same thing kind of morphing into a direction where everybody's seeming to get involved with interest rates not moving at the 6.875% that they've been kind of hovering around the 6.8757. If we track the 10-year, what I believe is happening is the perception from the buyer's side, tracking the 10-year, is that interest rates aren't necessarily good right now, but will be better next quarter or possibly next year.
You're talking about buyer sentiment?
Yeah. So if we sideline for now, maybe a better opportunity will present itself. And then you have the speculation that, okay, well, that's what buyers are thinking. And that's why we're not getting the buyer activity that we were hoping we would see. But you, as of recently, seem to have a different experience that explained where all the buyers are actually kind of congregating.
So for people who are listening, if you don't do this for a living, people don't necessarily know that if you talk to big listing agents across the community, all of us are having the exact same experience, and that is, oh my word, our listings are just sitting here, which in the last decade is a pretty new experience. We saw that for a little while in 2022. And it's hovered in sort of a gentler market is really the way to put it. For many years, honestly, the real estate agent community was able to be somewhat lazy in the sense that if you put a property on the MLS, it's on Zillow, it's going to get a ton of activity, and oftentimes you have bidding wars that just make you look like a hero without a lot of work. And no dissing that strategy and the times that happened, but it's taking a lot more work and time, which means there's a lot of reflection, a lot of time for reflection, both on the seller side and those of us that are the professionals that get hired to actually sell the houses, and a lot of insecurity of like, what in the world is actually happening, right? But I don't think that most people like out there just owning homes are aware that there's this sort of shock experience really in the last, I would say, 6 weeks to 2 months of all of a sudden, it's almost like the brakes have been tapped. You're flying down the freeway and you're kind of in this moment of, well, what is this? What's happening?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the buyers have spoken, and that's kind of what they're saying. I think that it's really tough to gauge exactly when the time is appropriately to pivot from one strategy to the next. How exactly do you determine this? And a lot of the reason is because there's so many different factors. And I think that one of the things that isn't being capitalized on, just to have a general opinion that I develop, and I don't know if this is overall consensus, I don't really look into that, I just have my own opinions, but what we look at is if your perception is that buying time is when interest rates go down, which is a natural thought process, like, well, my monthlies are going to go down if the interest rates are lower when I get in that mortgage, that's perfectly fine, but the sellers have a say in that as well. And if your monthlies will go down because of the interest rate decrease, they will essentially adjust their home prices to keep you inside of the same monthlies. And then therefore you might not necessarily have the advantage of capitalizing on a decreased home price with higher interest rates, right? And then if you do, you buy that house when the interest rates decrease, then you can refinance and then your monthly is actually lower. If this is where the monthlies exist and they decrease interest rates, sellers could have the opportunity to increase their home price and then thus your monthly stayed the same and you missed the opportunity you were trying to capitalize on.
Yeah, so let's break this down, slow roll it a little bit. So for people that don't talk in mortgage language, home selling, buying language on a daily basis, what has happened, let's back this up. What I think everybody expected is when interest rates went up, housing prices would go down. That didn't happen, surprisingly. And the easy solution or the easy explanation for that is the law of supply and demand. There was way more buyers than there were houses. Interest rates went up. Everybody's saying, oh, well, obviously, per what you just said, if the monthlies are going up, then the housing price has to come down to kind of accommodate for that. As it turns out, there were enough buyers that still could qualify. We've kept almost flatline and slightly trending up for the last couple of years with higher interest rates. What we're experiencing right now is what feels like an upswell of a buyer's market. I've been saying for the last few weeks, hey, I think that in 60 days we'll look back on the statistics and see that we are in more of a buyer's market than the statistics reflect, simply because that's a lagging indicator. We will see that in the rearview mirror. What we're experiencing right now is lots of listings across the market, not getting a whole lot of love, and they're priced accurately, at least based on all of our expert back-looking data, right?
Yep.
So something interesting. So I'll just share the story of one of our sellers that we just recently had. So rewind a couple months, the market shifted as market shifted in about 6 weeks, 2 months ago. All of a sudden, we've got super diminished and suppressed buyer enthusiasm. It's really the only way to put it. And so sellers and listing agents all across the community are saying, where are all the buyers, right? So we just recently went to a seller and said, hey, will you trust us? We have a strategy. Number one, you get some weird elements to your property that you're going to get beat up by the pickiest buyer pool that we've ever seen in the market in the last decade. And buyers have every right to be picky because A, they used to qualify, if you rewind 3 years ago, the exact same buyer that qualifies for a $600,000 house was probably qualifying for what? At 2.75%. What would you say, Brandon?
Oh, significantly higher.
Easy 750.
Easy,
right?
Yeah.
Maybe even higher. So you're looking at $600,000 houses right now as a buyer, and your appetite is closer to the $800,000 market based on a just moments ago, 2 years ago, having a much lower interest rate. And so this buyer pool has an appetite that was honed at a higher price point. Now they feel almost in a sense robbed by the higher price point or higher interest rate because their price point just went dramatically down with the exact same monthly payment. So that brings us to approaching the seller and saying, will you trust us with a strategy? In this case, a much lower price point than a lot of our other listings. The house comped out at around $650,000 in its current condition. But I absolutely know for a fact that had we listed that house at $650,000, we would have gotten maybe an offer, maybe 2 offers, maybe 3 offers, and they would have savagely beat up our seller who's hiring us to get him top dollar and make sure that he walks away with the most money in his bank account. He absolutely would have gotten savagely nitpicked over by sort of the odd elements or some of the deficiencies with the property. So we went to him and said, will you trust us? We'd like to list your house at $590,000, potentially $60,000 lower than we would have listed it for otherwise, knowing full well that the absolute top that we think we could have gotten in was $625 under the set of circumstances. So we listed at $590. How many showings do you think we got?
In the arena of 30 in 5 days.
And
So
20 of those
6 a day.
20 of those came through our open house, which is unheard of.
Those are 80
Those were all the
alone.
showings. So 50 plus
yeah,
showings.
50 plus.
Yeah, which is absolutely unheard of in today's market right now. Got 10 offers, and I would venture a guess to say 10 more agents and buyers that bowed out when they saw how competitive it was.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The end result was we just went under contract with a cash offer, basically no relevant contingencies at $660,000. Mm-hmm. $657,900, I think, was the exact amount that it all ended up being with the escalation clauses.
And he was willing to escalate to 710.
Exactly.
So he would have stayed in the fight for quite above what was actually being asked.
Right, exactly. And that dynamic basically turned the market sentiment on its head. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing this consistently across the market, even when we're representing buyers, with the really aggressively priced properties that are in an excellent condition for the price. In this case, our seller had worked his tail off to get this property in excellent condition, but it had some deficiencies that at a higher price point would have been savagely nitpicked over, whereas at the $590,000 price point, it was basically the coolest thing in the entire market that weekend at that price point. And we literally turned the sentiment on its head and had the exact opposite response on the market. So I think from a seller standpoint, it's a dicey move, and I wouldn't recommend it in every circumstance. I was talking to a client last night and saying, "Hey, I'm glad we didn't do that strategy," and I think that at the closer to the $1 million price point, there's just a lot of varying factors. But in this case, this was a prime, like almost petri dish in a lab example of getting our client at least $35,000 more than we would have gotten in any other circumstance. And it was a cash offer with no inspection, all contingencies waived. Mm-hmm. And we know for an absolute rock solid, unequivocal fact that we were able to get them top dollar because we had the entire market looking at the house over the course of 5 days. Mm-hmm. Whereas the scary thing with overpricing in the market right now is you get so few people through. If you end up with one offer, it's hard to know what would more time give us more exposure, right? Mm-hmm. When the fewer the bodies, the more questions you have.
Yeah, no, I love that story. I love the story because it really is. It was a bold strategy, and it worked really well. I think to your point, I think there's circumstances where, yeah, that'd be a little bit more risky than some people might want to play with. But in hindsight, looking back, that specific scenario didn't actually seem as risky as it did while we were implementing that. And so when I had time to analyze the movement that actually occurred after the fact, like, well, where are all these people coming from? You know, everybody's coming out of their basements. They're coming out of the woodwork. They're jumping in on this
While
thing.
the rest of the market is saying, where are the buyers? We had about 50 come through.
Yeah. So you could have a listing that's priced appropriately, and over the period of a month, see 5 or 6 showings, 10 at the most. You had that on day one. You had that in the first 3-4 hours. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh my gosh, what did we just discover? Well, the idea, especially on the supply and demand side, economics and the way they kind of shift is if you want to catch the largest bass, you have to have the best lure, right? So that's your demand. Now you can catch a bunch of 11-inch brown trout with power bait and fish eggs, but if you improve your lure, you're going to really bring in like these 15, 16 inch bass.
Yeah.
So what we didn't know we were doing, what we kind of had the idea behind the strategy is that we were sort of implementing an inventory in an area that existed inside two demographics of the market for buyers. So when you price something at $590, you actually brought in a home price that exists inside of the median household income availability to buy, which is in between $450 and $600, depending on how many standard deviations you go outside. But so now you price something at $590, all the people with the first numbers 5, they're looking at this, right? But you create a value purchase off of that too. So the people who had $600,000-$700,000 in purchasing power saw a value. And then all of a sudden they showed up too. So you're basically operating inside two demographics of buyers. So then you had a flood. And then you had nothing else that was competing similar to your property. So when you look at a property and you say, okay, what's going to draw in buyers in comparison to other inventory? Feature, price, location. Like, what are the features of the property? What's the price of the property? Is it too high, too low? What's the location? And on this particular property, you had all those things. It had multiple different features. It was priced under what it would comp for. And its location was secluded, but not far outside of the city.
Yeah.
Right? So it was ideal on all segments. The buyers are out there. The buyers exist. But what's your lure look like? Once you have the right lure in place, features, location, price, is now all of a sudden they just showed up, right? And then you had your bidding war, you had all this volume. And so what we discovered in this very small sample size is that, does this work always and should be considered? No, that's somewhat dangerous.
Recklessly underpricing every listing would just be a poor strategy. And we're not recommending that to our colleagues out there at all, nor to sellers to have their agents do that.
Precisely. But if you evaluate your surrounding inventory, what are you up against? What's your competition? Ask yourself, what am I bringing to the table that they're already not? Like, you just recently did a comp in a Seattle area, and we were looking at very specific numbers of very accurate comps, and was like, look at this. This guy listed this at, I think it was $690. It sold for $740. This guy listed the exact same house at $740, and it's still sitting there, and it will probably end up going for $690.
That was probably one of the clearest clearest market analyses that we've done recently.
Right.
So, guys, Brandon pulled all the comps on a Seattle property that we're going to be listing here in about a month, and the price is $740. This house has a bunch of direct comparables at $740, but every single house that was listed at $740 is dropping. Like, they originally listed at $740, exact same house, small, nothing special about this house over there in that market. It's a small lot, small house, flat roof, but a bunch of them that are very similar. Every single house that sold for listed for $740 was selling for closer to $690. And every house that listed at $690 was bidding up to $735 to $740. Yeah. It was like an absolutely immutable, unbroken pattern, and it was exactly what we're seeing with some of these other properties here in our Kitsap County market area. Again, I don't necessarily recommend recklessly underlisting properties. Here's when you're talking about the lure, I want to go back to that. You can have the absolute most immaculate property, and that doesn't give you the right in the free market to overprice. So that's why our job is so important, to put in a ton of thought and effort and basically be able to demonstrate to clients, sellers out there, hey, here's that window. And there's always going to be a window. That's unless you're in a cookie cutter, identical neighborhood that was all built in the exact same time, and there's a large enough segment, 1,000 houses, 500 houses in a neighborhood, we can say within $5,000, this is what this house is worth. And that's what the Zestimate on Zillow does. The more unique, the more rural, the more unusual the property is, the wider that window is. And anybody that tells you different doesn't know what they're talking about. And in that window of, let's call it 800 to 900 or a million to 1.125, right? There's going to be a window of, hey, your property's going to sell in this window. Since the market started slowing down, I think I said this on the last podcast, since the market started slowing down in late 2022, we immediately shifted our strategy and said, hey, we're going to start listing at the top of this window. Because if we list at the bottom of this window, which has worked fairly well for years, it's going to bid up. We're going to list at the top of this window because if we list at the bottom, we'll get one offer. 2 people will come through the house, 3 people will come through the house, 1 person will offer. We won't have any bidding war. There won't be any buyer enthusiasm. And then we'll sell at that lower price point. And you won't ever know if you had listed higher, if you would get that. We're seeing the buyer enthusiasm substantially swell for what a perceived good deal is and substantially absolutely freeze out anything that seems to be overpriced. And I haven't seen, it feels more ruthless than I have ever seen it in the market right now, of the absolute freeze out of anything that perceives to be overpriced and the dogpiling on anything that perceives to be a good deal. And I think that all makes sense. And obviously, years from now, we'll be able to look back and have better data. But at boots on the ground right now, I would venture a very strong, educated guess that the reason why buyers are being as savagely economically focused is because they're walking into the market feeling injured. I used to be qualified at 750, 800,000. I'm now qualified for 600, 625. These houses are disappointing to me because of what I was used to. So basically, the few properties that flatter that buyer with, hey, this actually looks like a good deal after I'm disappointed with everything else. You capture the emotion, you capture the vision, you capture the sentiment, and they're all dogpiling on those houses and freezing out everything else that seems like a poor deal.
Yeah, I think, give or take a few statements in there, but I think it's 100% correct. I think there's something else too, and I know that you've had conversations with people inside of church community, inside of the communities that you operate in too, and I'm wondering if this plays a role, and I don't know exactly how this role would fit inside of this sentiment, inside of this thesis, but the first-time homebuyer age has gravitated up significantly, right? And so all the way up to 38 is the new age of the first-time homebuyer, and I think if you go back a decade or so, I think it was around 30. But conversations that you're having in the trenches with the parents are, how are our kids going to get into home ownership? And it's like you're building this rental type economy, where people are just like, well, I'm okay with renting because I've been renting this entire time now, and it's more normal than not. So if you have a situation like that, like what are you bringing to the market of buyers that's going to sway them out of what is that normal mindset of, well, our scenario is exactly the same inside of our cookie cutter area that I live in Kitsap County, where all the houses were the same. They're all built by the same developer, right? And then you have my mortgage is X amount, and then my renters came in at the exact same time. So we both owned and rented 10 years. So we're literally just living alongside each other. And I talk about this all the time because my mortgage was static and their rent has doubled what my mortgage is now. So if they just bought back then, they would have been, but they're outside of that window of age where it's like, okay, well, I'm just comfortable with renting. You know what I mean? So if I'm going to buy, where's my incentive to buy? I've been injured, right? And you're going to continue to keep this high elevation of pricing. What's going to incentivize me to break out of my normal pattern?
Sure.
When you have people you have 18 years of 20 to 38 saying, I'm not buying a house right now anyways.
Right.
So how do you incentivize them to come to the table? Well, how you incentivize them is do exactly what you did, because the way that you approached that pricing structure and that strategy brought so many young 20 to 38-year-olds and their new clients.
Dude, you're so right.
I
honestly hadn't even thought of that until you just mentioned that. We saw so many young couples, young families, people that had bought their first house or were thinking about buying their first house, and a deal presented itself such that they were motivated to get out and join us at this particular property. Yeah. We haven't seen that in a long time. Interesting. Yeah.
So how you're pricing in a house and what you're doing in these strategies, where is the market at? The market is actually listings are increasing, and so are mortgage applications. So they exist. What are you doing to change sort of the dynamic of how you've done the old strategy? That's the question. If you stick to the old strategy, it might not necessarily work out for you, as you've seen in some cases. For sure. If you pivot and you make adjustments for what both the statistics are telling you, but also the emotional temperature of the streets, you can come up with some pretty creative scenarios that generate like the tsunami that you just experienced.
Bro, on the next podcast, when you come back here next time, what I want to do is do kind of a deep dive into like those off-book, lesser-known, like cutthroat strategies that we're advising our clients across the market. Like I just spent across 2 showings yesterday with one of the clients, the buyers that we met at this most recent kind of bidding war hot property that we just went under contract on. I just talked them through a bunch of different angles of here's how we kind of Jedi outmaneuver the cash buyer that won that one. Let's dive into that next week because we don't have enough time today. But there's so many different strategies that we're coaching people through that I don't think are like what people are thinking about. Because certainly when I talk to clients about it, they're like, "Oh my word, we'd never even thought about that."
Never thought and never heard of, haven't entertained.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of different directions you can go.
Yeah, if you're looking to sell a house, I think our message is my message has been for over a decade and will continue to be perfect. The market blesses perfect. Mm-hmm. Pricing has never been more critical, and having a really, really well thought through pricing strategy, because there's always a window. And if you approach it from either a weak agent just rolling over and going with whatever price a seller says that they want, or a seller demanding, I guess I'll say this, I often find myself in a situation where it feels like our clients, sellers in the market, think that arguing with us, with me specifically, about the price will get them more money. And that's part of my job. I'm more than happy to continue explaining that for as long as I do this. If you're a seller listening to this conversation, I would say make sure that your real focus is hiring an absolute freaking top shelf real estate broker, and make sure that real estate broker has a track record of selling at top dollar and negotiating for their clients, and then trust them. Because let's end with this. I had an amazing conversation with the seller of the story that we just told. And he said, "Peter, I don't think most people realize the emotional process that we just went through." He's like, I want you to know the emotional process we went through to trust you. He's like, my girlfriend and I talked, I think his term was ad infinitum, about the strategy that you presented. And he's like, it was a scary thing. And we trusted you, and we're walking away with tens upon tens upon tens of thousands of dollars more. And I'm grateful for that. But it was a beautiful window into a client that trusted us, starting a process that terrifyingly looked like he was about to lose a lot of money that he thought that he was due on a property that he poured his whole heart and soul into for many, many years. And the strategy paid out. That doesn't always pay out, and a lot of it comes down to the professionalism of the people that you trust. And I am so grateful for this particular client that trusted us, because that isn't always the case. And without a trusting relationship with somebody that's, anyway, I could go on, but does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And I really look forward to just dissecting each and every one of these strategies and systems and plays and exactly how to go about it. But yeah, in the end, top shelf agent and trust them. That's the message.
Let's cover one other thing. I think there is a window in the market right now for sellers with this or a variation of this pricing strategy to absolutely get top dollar, while most other sellers are sitting on the market for a long period of time. So there's that. But buyers specifically, I think that right now there's a very ripe, low-hanging fruit opportunity to get deals in a way that there haven't been deals for a long time. And we'll talk more on the next podcast about some of the really off-book strategies, but the absolutely bland, vanilla, in-your-face opportunity that isn't off-book at all, that should be low-hanging fruit for everyone, is houses that have been listed at the high end of the window. I'm not even talking about houses that are overpriced and the seller and the agent should have known better. I'm talking about our own listings that have sat on the market for a little while. We're not going to let this happen to our clients, but all across the market, there are listings that are sitting there that are at an absolutely valid price but they've been sitting there long enough that sellers and their agents are discouraged. And if a buyer has the intestinal fortitude and endurance with an agent to go in and just mass make low offers, and I don't mean lowball insulting offers, but offers at the very bottom of what that window is, we know, and anyone listening to this podcast should know, if that house had been priced at that low end, it would have bid up and sold immediately, but it got listed at the top end, and now there is no buyer enthusiasm pushing it higher. I think the real opportunity is for buyers to say, you know what? Okay, fine. The interest rate's 7%. I hope that it comes down. But today, there's an opportunity in the market to go out there and make 10%, 5% low offers all across the market. Get it under contract simply because at those slightly overpriced listings, there's this vacuum of interest. And if you make one offer, you'll be discouraged. You'll think this is a poor strategy. You make 20 offers, I guarantee you'll have a different experience. As long as they're not actually stupid lowball offers, we're talking about in the realm. And then you get under contract for an excellent deal, and then you just bide your time. Don't do this if you can't actually qualify for the monthly payment. But if you can qualify for the monthly payment, then you are sitting there like a king on your castle when the interest rates drop. And all you have to do is call your mortgage broker and drop the interest rate instead of participating in the all-out crazy scramble that's going to happen the minute the interest rates drop. And that's going to be a zoo.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't know, like, let's just on that, you don't know the state of the seller, right? So you may have a perfectly patient seller who's, you have sellers who are perfectly patient and they're totally fine. But you don't know in those numbers, in those figures, in those comps, there is nothing about the position of the seller in there. You don't know if they're waiting to buy their next house to sell this one, if they're moving in a couple months and they really got to unload this. You don't know their state. And if you, not necessarily to be insensitive and say that there's blood in the water, but if you can capitalize on an opportunity that you can't necessarily look through the lens of and see, oh, that's my opportunity, you would send out a few offers, but you're eventually going to find your seller who's kind of getting squeezed in the market, took the advice of their agent, is now dropping and dropping and dropping, and it's like, okay, time's running out on this clock. And then you finally come in and present an offer, which isn't necessarily what they wanted, but it might be the solution to the different problem that they're having right now too. Thus, they accept the offer, and then there you have it. You don't know that until you try it.
Yeah.
So
crazy. Bro, let's wrap it up for this week or this month, and we'll come back next time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, thanks for talking.
Yep.
All right.